everybody. This is the Macaron Bake Along with Heather Martin. I'm Heather. My little business is Macarons and More, and I'm in Katy, Texas. And I'm going to talk for a few minutes while people show up because I'm a teeny tiny bit early, but I wanted to make sure this was working. And while I'm doing the bake along today, my daughter is going to be on my right with my laptop open, answering your questions, asking me your questions while we're live, so that if anybody has questions while they're baking, if you have, not grubby hands to type in your questions, I can answer them as we go along. Hi, everybody. Hopefully, before class, everybody found the links that I posted in actually it was a post I made, so it's under my name, and basically it is a tips and tricks brochure, pamphlet, and it also has the ingredients we need for today, my favorite tools, and even a recipe for buttercream at the back. So even if you haven't printed this out yet, that's okay. If you are actually going to bake along with me right now, I recommend you print it and have it handy, because you can also, when I do classes in person, I have a copy for everybody in person so that you can take notes as you go along. Now, hopefully I will say all the things that you need me to say in this video, but it's sometimes hard to remember all the things you learned in class, and so I'm a big note taker, so I write notes as I go along. So anyway.
There's a lot of people commenting just come out.
Oh, good. Okay. Hi, everybody.
Someone's from Atlanta and then Michigan.
Oh, Atlanta and Michigan? I suspect most people are going to be from the United States just because of our timing. Some people said they would love to come, but it was 3 a.m. for them on the other side of the world, so they weren't getting up this early, which I totally understand. Luckily, I will, at the end of the live, I will save this video so that you guys can watch it back later. All right. Hopefully, for those of you who are baking along with me, you've already weighed out your ingredients. So I'm going to go ahead and start. The first thing we should talk about is what macarons are. For those of you who have not had them before or made them before, they are a sandwich cookie. They have two shells or cookies, top and bottom, and then there's filling inside. Now, this macaron that I made last week is coffee flavored. It has sort of a brown and white swirl, you can see, and we'll be talking about how to make that effect in class today. I love buttercream. It's what I fill pretty much all my macarons with. Sometimes I fill them with lemon curd and buttercream, or other compotes, things like that. And we'll talk about how to use things like jams and curds when you're filling your macarons when we get toward the end of class today. Because those things like to squish out, and that doesn't make for a very lovely bite, and it doesn't make them very pretty. It makes them slippery and slidey, and they're hard to handle. So buttercream's my favorite. Ganache also works. So hopefully you've also made a filling to use today as well. It was sort of homework, but I will be making mine live today. So if you forgot yours, there will be a little time to do yours as well. All right. So macarons are basically 4 ingredients: almond flour, powdered sugar, granulated sugar, and egg whites. I also use cream of tartar. It's a stabilizer for the meringue, because basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making meringue, and then we're going to be adding that meringue to almond flour and powdered sugar, our dry ingredients, and it makes this very strange batter that you pipe and make your cookies with. So the first thing I want to do today is we're going to start with our dry ingredients. So the way I teach macaron making in the classes that I do them in my home. I have 3 mixers. This is Monica. Say hi to Monica.
Hi, Monica.
Phoebe and Rachel also work in my kitchen, but as is with the friends' personalities, Phoebe's a little flighty and Rachel is not as reliable. So I usually use Monica when I'm working in the kitchen. So I have weighed out my almond flour and powdered sugar into a bowl. I put them both together. You don't have to put them together. You can do them separately. That's fine. You're going to need your almond flour and your powdered sugar. You're going to need a sifter. And you're going to need a larger bowl or a piece of parchment to...
Paris.
Someone's from Paris? Texas?
No. I don't know. It's in Paris.
I'm glad she got up early. All right, you guys.
Someone said they can't hear.
They can't hear. Okay.
Unmute it.
Oh, God. Have I been muted this whole
I have
time?
no clue.
Let me turn up my volume. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Do you need a microphone?
I hope not. The whole reason I was using my phone was so that I wouldn't need.
Someone, they can hear you now.
They can hear me now. Fantastic. All right. Hopefully you'll be able to go back and hear those things that I said
They said better.
better. Okay.
You did.
Fantastic. All right, so we're going to use our almond flour and our powdered sugar first. And you're going to dump half of it, all of it, into your sifter. I dump all of it. We're going to sift it all together. You want to sift your powdered sugar and your almond flour together. The way I do it is I put my hand on the side of the bowl and I tap my sifter against my hand and I move the sifter. And that usually does a pretty good job. And then I'll end up with a bunch of these larger pieces. And I use the back of a really large spoon. This is a serving spoon that I stole from my silverware drawer. And I'm just going to use the back of my spoon to push around the edge of my sifter. And then I'm going to scrape it back into the middle and then push and scrape and push and scrape. Over and over until I get everything through my sifter. Now, when I took a class on how to make macarons, they said, why would you weigh your ingredients and then not use every single thing that you can? Except maybe some little tiny pieces at the very, very end. Which I thought was a really good tip, because so many instructions show and tell you that you can leave extras in the bottom and just dump them. And I think it makes your ingredients off. So that's how I like to do it. Yes.
If
We have a question.
if we did the processor method,
Oh yeah.
do we do the sifter too?
No. So I also brought out my food processor because I was thinking about demoing it, but I wanted to demo the sifter more. You can absolutely run it through your food processor. If you do that, you don't need to sift. I pretty much, if I'm making one batch, I'll use my sifter. If I'm making any more than one batch, I will run them through my food processor. And you really want, if you're going to use your food processor, you only need to mix your ingredients for about 10 seconds. It goes really fast, and the goal is not to make paste, which is what will happen if you let it run too long, because that almond flour basically turns into a paste, just like if you were doing peanut flour, it would ultimately end up being like peanut butter, and that is not what you're wanting today. The goal is to get rid of any chunks and to make it as like homogeneous as you can. So this is what my bowl looks like now. My almond flour and powdered sugar are pretty well mixed. So I'm going to set that to the side now. So now we're going to make our meringue. So you need your powdered sugar, your granulated sugar or your caster sugar. And then you need your egg whites, which I've already weighed. And for those of you who don't love cracking eggs and think, ooh, I can just buy the carton eggs at the store, the egg whites at the store, I will tell you, there are some people who swear by they just use carton eggs. I have not had good luck with just using carton eggs. They don't, because they are pasteurized and they've been heated, they, for me, don't whip up as big and fluffy, and you don't get the stability in the meringue that you really want and need for especially French macarons, because we are not heating anything here until we put them in the oven. So with Italian meringue, which is an Italian macarons, which is what Meredith Martin did her lesson, her bake-along, she made those kind of, she made Italian macarons, and you heat your egg whites and your sugar beforehand. And we're not going to do that. We're going straight into our mixer with our egg whites. And I've actually already, when I measured my cream of tartar, I dumped it in my egg whites already. So I have my cream of tartar and my egg whites going in my stand mixer. And I'm going to try not to talk when my stand mixer is on, just because it's a little loud. So I'm going to pretty much give instructions before we turn on our mixers. So right now, what we want to do is we're going to, especially if you have a KitchenAid mixer, we're going to turn it to level 4. And we're going to mix until we can't see any more clear egg whites at the bottom. We want white, fluffy bubbles. So go ahead and turn on your mixers. One teaspoon. 1 teaspoon of cream of tartar.
And then, where do I get the ingredients list with the amounts?
So there was a post earlier with somebody asked, where can I get the list of ingredients? And there was a post earlier that I made, so search the group for Heather Boyd Martin, and there's a picture of me, my face, saying, hey, today is Macaron Bake-Along Day. Here are all the things you need to know. you should be pretty close to that frothy bubble stage at this point. We're gonna add our granulated sugar in 3 parts. We're gonna add about 1/3, just eyeball it with the mixer going. You don't have to stop. So add about 1/3, wait about 30 seconds, add the next 1/3, and then add the final 1/3, with it still on level 4. I do not age my eggs. I don't know if you guys can hear me over the mixer, but I do not age my eggs. I do let them come up to room temperature. So I cracked my eggs about 2 hours before class started. That's about as good as I can do most days. So some people recommend aging them. You crack them and put like cling wrap over the top of the bowl and poke holes in them and put them in the refrigerator for a couple of days, and that is aging your egg whites. I don't do that.
I see your recipe includes a half tea something.
Yep.
Cream of tartar. However, I thought I heard you say you're using 1 teaspoon. Is your recipe double?
I'm gonna look at my recipe. So somebody asked if it was teaspoons or tablespoons. I said 1. It's a half. What I'm using today in class, the recipe that I gave you guys, is a half teaspoon, not a full teaspoon. But if you ended up putting a whole teaspoon in, it would not hurt. Okay.
So it is double?
No, only half teaspoon of cream of tartar is in our mix. That's your recipe, that's my recipe. That's what I'm making today, exactly what you guys are making. Okay, now all of my powdered, or all of my granulated sugar is now in, and I'll show you what my meringue looks like. So we've got not even soft peaks, no peaks yet, just messy. Sorry. The shadows are difficult. Anyway, that's what it looks like, and it would spill if you could see it really good. So I'm putting it back on the mixer. We're gonna turn it up to 6, and we're not gonna go any higher than that. And the reason is, when I used to teach class, when I started, I would tell everybody, turn your mixer all the way up to 10. And you can do that. However, I have recently learned that if you keep your mixer on a lower speed, like medium, and you mix your meringue for a longer period of time, it's probably going to take us about 6 to 10 minutes, your meringue will be more stable, and when you bite into the cookie part, it will be full. You'll have full shells instead of hollow shells. So this is one of those tips and tricks that that I have found to be successful in getting rid of hollow spaces in my shells. So I'm gonna turn my mixer up to 6 and start. However, if you want to color your entire batch of meringue and macarons, now is a perfect time, because you've turned off your mixer. Now is the perfect time to add some gel food coloring, or even powdered food coloring. So usually I start with 3 or 4 drops, but don't be afraid to add more than that. I frequently add a whole squeeze to mine. So you can add yours now. I'm not going to. I'm going to wait, and because I want to show you a technique later. However, I am going to add 1 drop of violet because macarons end up not being white. If you put no food coloring in them at all, they'll be beige. So if you know your color wheel, they're a little bit yellow because of the almond flowers, a little bit yellow. So to balance that and to try to get closer to white, we add a little bit of purple or violet. In this case, I use Chef Master. And I'm going to put just 1 drop in my meringue, and that's going to help counteract the yellow in the almond flour. All right, I'm going to turn my mixer up to 6, and we're going to let it go for a little while.
What is the recipe if I add the color to the egg whites?
No, it will not hurt your recipe at all to add your color to the egg whites. You can add it at the very beginning, especially if you have something like sugar art, which is powdered food coloring that needs to develop and uses liquid to activate it. Adding it to your egg whites before you mix them is perfect. I have a hard time looking at egg whites when they have food coloring in them. It kind of grosses me out. I don't really know, I can't really explain it very well, but it kind of creeps me out, so I don't do it that way. I add it now. I'm also going to stop my mixer only because I have meringue on the sides of my bowl and I want to scrape it down in there. But you guys don't need to stop yours. So the goal is stiff peaks. And you want to get to a point where it starts to look like shaving cream, starts to pull away from the sides, and when you take out your whisk, it has not only stiff peaks, but like weird bird beak things. That's how far we want to go today. Yes. I do. I can, sort of. It's far away and it's very small, so it's hard for me to see. Does anybody have questions? So my mixer's only been going for a few minutes. And I'm at sort of a soft peak stage. If you can see my meringue, that peak doesn't want to stand up quite on its own. So it needs to go longer. I think this is one of the hardest things that people struggle with, is knowing how long to keep going. The other thing is every mixer is different. So your mixer may go faster than mine. If I set up Phoebe, Rachel, and Monica right next to each other, started them at the exact same time, they would all finish at different times. Because of the number of rotations, the number of times they go around in a minute, every single one is different.
At what stage would you add your flavor in?
Here's my super secret tip. I don't add flavoring. I don't like to add extracts and things to my meringue or my shells at all. I only add it to my filling because once the macaron shells get put together with the buttercream or your whatever filling you use, they share flavors. So the buttercream will leach the flavor and it will soften the shells, and it will also make those shells more flavorful. They will impart their flavor to them. So I don't feel the need to mess with the trickiest part of making macarons, which is making the shells. So no food, no extracts, no flavoring. However, you could add cocoa powder to your shells, to your almond flour powdered sugar mix. You can add probably half a teaspoon of extracts to your meringue, and I would have done that already. But you could add it in now, that would be fine. I have just found that sometimes if I add flavoring, my shells don't come out right. And so, because we eat with our eyes, I do as much as I can to trick people into knowing what the flavor is by just what they're looking at, and the flavor and the smell from buttercream. All right, I need to finish mine. Hopefully you're finished with yours.
Someone asked, do you personally prefer parchment or matte when you prepping your things?
So the question is parchment or matte? My personal preference is matte. And the reason is because I have better success getting perfectly round macarons when I pipe on silicone mats. When I use parchment, and I'll show both today, I'm just not as good. Though there's something about the sort of waviness of the parchment that inhibits them from being like perfectly round.
What can be substituted for template sheet?
So if you want a template, because you don't have, so this is really good. So see those weird like bird peaks? I really like this meringue. This is a good place to stop. Okay, so back to templates. You don't need a template. It's helpful for sure, especially when you're starting out. I have printed off pieces of paper from the internet. All you have to do is search Google for macaron template, and I would do macaron template circle, macaron template heart. You can pretty much search any word after macaron template and find options out there that are available. And I just print them off and then use them as is. I'll show you. So, I bought, like Heather and Corey, I bought this JFB, Just Find Best macaron parchment. They have, sorry, I have my fan going. I'm going to turn that off. So you can see they've got each macaron circle has 2 circles, and we'll talk about why that is. But you don't need to use that. You can, so I have a binder of all my macaron things, and we can talk about what's in here in a little bit. But I have templates because I like to try different shapes. So I just have the Among Us people. I made oranges one time. I did clouds. And so I just printed 2 sheets of clouds, put tape on them, and they were a little big, so I had to fold the edges, but still, it works. And then you should be able to see those clouds underneath the circles. And of course, if you didn't have circles, you would be able to easily see those clouds under the parchment. And sometimes I have even baked them in the oven with the template still underneath. Okay, let me also show you my favorite mats, since we're talking about it. These are my favorites. They're A-Prince, all one word, A-P-R-I-N-C-E. They're always pink edged, so you know which one they are. They have circles, and then they also have like cat ears. So I'll be piping on both parchment and the macaron mats today. But we're not quite ready for that yet. Okay, so we have our meringue, we have our almond flour and powdered sugar, and I'm gonna grab me my favorite spatula, which is a Pampered Chef spatula. I know, they're expensive, but they are stiff, but not too stiff. It's my favorite, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just my favorite. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna add our almond flour and powdered sugar mixture, about half of it. You're just gonna pour it into the bowl of your stand mixer. Now, some people give you instructions and say, do the reverse. Put the meringue into the almond flour. It honestly does not matter. The whole reason I do it this way is because I want a handle. And because I pick up my bowl and I fold while holding onto my bowl using my using the handle. So you're going to fold your mixture, which means you're going to use the back of the spatula to push and then come through the middle. So you're going to like scrape the bowl and then come through the middle. Scrape the bowl and come through the middle. And you're going to keep doing that motion, that folding motion, until you don't see any more almond flour and powdered sugar mixture. It's all been incorporated into your meringue. Now, I've been doing this a little while, so mine is already done. My half is already done. So I'm going to add my additional powdered sugar and almond flour. All right. I know, and I make a lot of noise too. All right, so you want to keep folding.
Can you show the movement to the camera?
I can try. Okay. I scrape the bowl and then I go through the middle. I don't know. I don't. So scrape the bowl and then push your spatula through the middle. And then scrape the bowl and through the middle. Yeah. So the goal is to get all of that powdered sugar and almond flour incorporated. Make sure you dig down to that center, especially if you have a KitchenAid mixer. The KitchenAid mixer bowls, especially the tilt head ones, they have a divot in the bottom, and powdered sugar and almond flour love to hide down in there. And you don't want it to hide. Now, I'm not teaching you how to cheat, but I could, because you could have added the almond flour powdered sugar mixture while your bowl was on your mixing stand and use the whisk to mix your dry ingredients in. However, it is super easy. Yeah. It's super easy to overfold it, and we don't want that. So this is sort of the hardest part of making macarons, and where most people go wrong. So all of my almond flour is now incorporated, but it is really thick, okay? The goal is to get it to a ribbon stage without going over. If you go too far, there's no way to fix it. And they won't bake up right in your oven, no matter what the temperature. There's just no saving them. That said, they will still be delicious, and you can eat them. They will just always be sticky. They will never, they won't get the proper feet on them that they should have. So, you want to fold or press your batter into the side of the bowl. And you want to test. So I can do it now by sight, but when I teach class, I tell everybody, lift up your batter and watch it fall into that bowl. And if it starts to fall in ribbons, like one continuous, not clumpy, then you look into the bottom of the bowl and you count to 20. And if your ribbons disappear into the bowl and you can no longer see where those ribbons were, you are done. Stop. Do not move any farther. Don't even scrape the bowl again. You are done. So the goal is to get your batter to the perfect place where it ribbons, but it doesn't disappear too fast. If it disappears in 10 seconds, you've almost gone too far. My favorite is right about 15 to 20 seconds. I would rather be under macaronaged, underfolded, rather than overfolded.
Can we add color now?
You can absolutely add color. I'm going to show adding color to our bags. But you can add color anytime. Just know that if you add it once you're already started folding, it's super easy to overfold because you're trying to get your color incorporated, and it's hard to stop looking at your batter for the consistency.
Will I be able to use the same silicone mats I used to bake cookies?
Ooh, that is a great question. Can you use the same silicone mats for cookies that you use for macarons? Generally, my answer is no. The oils in the cookies, okay, so my batter is very close to being ready. So I'm going to fold and check, and then stop. Not quite there. So the cookies that you make have tons of butter in them, and that butter and those oils will totally mess with your macarons. So I have mats that I do even savory food on, and I have separate macaron mats. Sorry, I've been talking too much and not folding enough, but you guys are probably already there. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I can still see those ribbons in the bottom of the bowl. So I'm going to go just another couple turns. All right, I'm done. I'm walking away. All right, I guess I can show you guys. So that's what I want to see. I want that ribbon texture. Okay, I'm putting that aside and stopping. So I pulled out, I was going to show you one large 18-inch bag. but instead I'm doing two 12-inch. So if you follow the directions that I posted, it said 18 inches. So you can either go with that or ignore that. If you only have 12-inch bags, because that's what you had at home, go with the 12-inch bags, but you'll need two. My super fancy cups are my kids' like 12-ounce plastic cups. I've had bubble guppies once upon a time. We've had just about every version of this cup known to man. So let's talk about tips real quick. So I pulled out a bunch so everybody could see. So if I'm going to do shapes and I need to make small things, like I made oranges and I piped a circle for the orange, but I made the little green part at the top of the orange. I used a Wilton 7. I also tried, when I was trying out tips, a size 10, Wilton 10. I think that's a little bit too small, but it does work great for shapes. I'm going to show you guys a 12 today, a Wilton 12. And I'm going to show you the way I put together a bag. And I know everybody who does sugar cookies knows how to put together a bag, but I do mine a little bit different than maybe you do. So the goal is to not have anything leak out. So I put my tip on top of my coupler. I cut the bottom of the bag off about 1 inch. And I put both the tip and the coupler inside my bag, and I push it to the very end. And hopefully it stays in the bag without falling out. And then I take the coupler nut, I don't know what to call it, and screw it on the outside of the bag. Now I have a seal so that I won't have any batter squirting out by the tip of my bag. Now, when I make these now, I don't bother with the coupler. But when I teach people who've never made them before, I think it's super helpful and to do it this way, at least in the beginning. So this is also another little tip and trick for making sure that you don't end up with a cup full of macaron batter before you're ready to use it. So I have these Wilton, should I do it like the Instagrammers do it? Tip covers, and that just slides on the tip. It doesn't snap or anything like that. So then I put my hand inside the bag, I fold the tip back to my hand, and I hold the tip, or the tip cover in this case, with my thumb, and then I shove my hand inside my cup, and then I use my other hand to help remove that hand, and I fold my bag over the edge of the cup. So the tip that I use now is an Ateco 804. Like that. This is my favorite tip. This is what I use on a regular basis. It is bigger than that Wilton 12. But the next size up in Wilton is a 2A, and this is a 2A. It is a little bit bigger. It fits over the end of my 804, just barely. So for me, this was a little big, but the 12 was a little small, so the 804 is what I use now. But you absolutely can use your 2A, your 1A, or even a star tip. A closed star tip would be fine. All right. So I'm going to do the same thing to my tip back to my hand, and I want the tip facing to the sky in the bottom of the cup. All right. Now the other thing I wanted to show you guys is the way I made these coffee flavored macarons. The shell is not flavored, it's just brown. But it's basically brown and white swirl. So the way I did this was you take your food coloring, your gel food coloring, not the crappy stuff you get at the grocery store that's alcohol based. You don't want that, that'll ruin your macarons. So I put a little bit of food coloring on the end of my paintbrush, and I'm gonna paint stripes on the inside of my cup, like 3 of them. That's it. Or you can just do a drop or 2 in your cup. Try to get your drops as close to the center middle as you can. But there you go.
Can we just cut the bag if you don't have that tip?
If you don't have a tip, you can absolutely cut your bag. Try to, as you guys know, cut it evenly. So you want to fold that seam flat and then cut. All right, so I have my 2 batters, cups, and I pour. You don't have to pour. You could do it differently. You can just scoop it out and in. The goal is to work as fast as possible once you have your batter made, because the batter starts to dry out, and you want all the drying to happen once you've piped your macarons. All right. And I'm going to move this out of the way. So I'm going to pick up the edge of my bags without pulling them out of my cups. And I'm going to use my rubber bands and tie them. Now, when I do this, I turn them upside down and leave them sitting like that, so that I don't get all that batter in the bottom of my cup. I've tried to avoid it, but you just never know. All right. So the meringue that we made, or the batter that we made, should roughly make about 60 shells or 30 finished macarons. So I'm gonna pipe half on parchment and half on my mats. Now my mats only have 20 circles, and my parchment only has 20. My mats have 24. So I would probably need a 3rd mat. We'll see though. All right. So I'm just smushing around my batter in my bag to make sure I pick up that color. Because I've got color here on one side and I've got it over here. All right, so now I'm gonna pipe. The way I pipe is this. So I hold a piping bag like, I think of it like driving. So I hold my coupler or my tip with one hand. This is my steering wheel. And the back of my bag, where my rubber band is, I'm gonna put that in the crook between my first finger and my thumb. And this is gonna be my brake and my gas. So in order to brake, I'm gonna stop squeezing. And to put on the gas, I'm gonna squeeze. So you're gonna hold your piping bag straight up and down, really close to the parchment or your mat, and you're gonna squeeze, and then you're gonna stop, and you're gonna move. And you're gonna squeeze, and stop, and move. Squeeze, stop, and move. Now, if you panic, turn your bag upside down and take a breath. I've had kids especially who get panicky because they start to move and then they drag batter all over their macaron mat. Not a big deal. Don't panic. Just turn your bag upside down. The challenge is it really won't stop. So once you stop squeezing, you want to make the decision and move to your next spot and then squeeze again, because it will sort of keep coming for you. One of the ways I get that sort of swirl with just a little bit of color is to move a little bit while I'm piping. I make just little tiny concentric circles with my piping bag. The challenge with adding color to your bag and not adding it to your batter as a whole is they're all going to come out differently. If you can see, I'll hold on to the parchment next time. Okay, so I don't really have control of how much color is going to come out with my macarons. And it's either fun for you and exciting because who knows what it's going to look like, or it's annoying because it's not consistent. And I go back and forth. I really like a consistent macaron look, especially because I'm selling them most of the time. So I want them to be as close to the same as possible. So I sometimes do this, but a lot of times I do not. I add it to the whole bag. The other thing you can do is put one color in here, one color in here, put both of these bags without the tips into a larger bag, or on cling wrap, and then pipe them together. Keeping two separate bags usually means that you're going to get even distribution of like two colors. This is definitely not even, but the more color you put into your bag, the more colorful they will be. All right.
With the concentric circles that you do, do you have issues with lopsided macarons?
I'm making tiny, watch. I'm barely moving my bag. So I am pushing the batter out from the center as I go. The chances that I'm going to be lopsided are if my concentric circles are too big. All right. That one's out. Now I'm going to do blue. Oh, it's been a while since I've used a 12 tip. This is not my favorite thing. I'm not a fan anymore. It takes a lot of pressure to get them out, which is probably good for you guys. But I like the flow of the 804 better. All right, I'm going to try to speed up a little bit so that we can see the next step, which is dropping your trays. And you're going to think I'm an insane person. And it's going to be loud, and I'm sorry, but
Volume warning.
yeah, volume warning says
Turn your
Kath.
volume down.
No, it'll be fine.
I can hear you from upstairs with my doors closed.
That's
with
true.
Earbuds on.
All right.
It's still loud enough to shock me. So, listen to me.
So these are my blue ones. It's got very little blue. I probably could have put more blue in there. All right. So the next step, once you have piped your macarons, here I'll do it with the first tray I made. you're gonna lift your tray level, parallel to your, sorry, brain fart, parallel to your surface, and you're gonna just drop it straight down, about 6 inches. And I want you to drop it maybe 3 or 4 times. It's a good way to find out if your tray is flat or not. So now what happens is little air bubbles come up to the surface. And I actually didn't have many that came up to the surface with this. So I'm liking that, but now is the time. I don't know what I did with my scribe. I've hidden it from myself. Here it is. So if you have little bubbles come up to the surface, you want to just break them open, break the surface tension, and then use the batter to fill those spots back up. Oh, darn. The first thing I was going to recommend is to turn on your ovens, and I totally forgot that. That was like an hour ago that I should have said that. Good job, Heather. All right. All right, I'm going to drop my second tray. The pain.
Yeah.
Kat says it's very painful to listen to me dropping trays.
They're kind of deaf, so they're kind of immune to it, but I have young and thriving ears.
Uh-huh.
They're everything.
So the other thing that I wanted to talk about in my bake-along is sprinkles. So I pulled out a bunch of different sprinkles today to show you guys, and I'm going to put each one on top of my macarons just to show you what they look like. So I have Jimmy's first. They are, so these are chocolate Jimmy's. I don't know if you could see that. And I'm going to drop a few on the top of that one. All right. Now I've got an eyeball. I'm sure you guys have these in your cabinet. I'll put it there. I've also got sanding sugar. Kat's favorite. My assistant cat.
That's the one I use for ice cream.
This is the one that she steals for ice cream every night. Okay. Then I've got like, no, decorating sugars. So this is like bigger pieces of sugar. So I'm gonna add that. All right. Then I've got nonpareils. I hope I'm saying that right. I don't know if I am or not. But I'm gonna put those on top. Then I call these like confetti, or they're like little flat circles. Here, I'll show the camera.
What size are you making? 1.5 inch or 2 inch?
So I pipe to the first circle, and when I drop my trays, they end up flattening out more to that second circle. So my finished macarons are about 2 inches. Sorry, somebody just asked that. All right. Then I'm also going to add these stars. So these stars, I know, are going to eat a hole through my macarons. I've tried them before. I thought they were fine. My general rule of thumb is, if it tastes like a sweet tart, it's going to eat a hole in your macarons. And you will have sad times. I also have this super cute, like princess sprinkle set, and I'm just going to use all of it. There are pink jimmies and some confetti and some like little white balls and something I know that tastes like a sweet tart are these like gems. So we're going to do a little bit of all of it just to show what happens.
What is the oven temperature?
My oven is set to 300. That is the one part that I really can't help other people with, is figuring out your oven. Some ovens run hot, some run cooler. It's really important to have, especially for macarons, to have an oven thermometer. I have two ovens. I have double oven wall unit, and the top oven runs straight up 300 every single time. When I set it at 300, it is 300. My lower oven runs hot, so when I set it at 300, it ends up about 315. So I have to bake at, I set it for 280, and it heats up to 300. There's no way in the world I would know that if I didn't have another thermometer in my oven testing what it actually says. And you'd be surprised because my oven is only 2 years old. We redid my whole kitchen 2 years ago this summer. And so even as like a brand new oven, it's still off. So I could probably have somebody come out and calibrate it and all that kind of stuff, but I haven't yet. All right. So we've got a tester row of all of our sprinkles. And they've been sitting out now at room temperature for probably 10 to 15 minutes. The goal is, before you put them in the oven, I think they need to have a little bit of a matte finish to them. They shouldn't look as glossy as they do once you when you first pipe them. And you should be able to just barely touch them and not get anything on your hand. So if you can barely touch the edge of one and it not be sticky like it was when it was first piped, you can put them in your oven. Now, I know my oven. I've practiced with my oven many, many times. If you're using parchment, I would start at about 15 minutes. I know for my oven, I need 16 minutes with parchment for one tray. For every tray I add, I bump up the time a minute. If I use mats, I bump up that time a minute. So if I'm using my mats and I'm baking 2 trays at a time, which is what I normally do, I bake 18 minutes. An extra minute for the mats and an extra minute for the second tray. If I was making 3 trays, I would bump up an extra minute to 19. The way you know if they are ready to come out of the oven is your timer goes off at 16 minutes, you're going to barely pull it out of the oven, and you're going to wiggle one macaron shell. Try not to burn yourself. If it wiggles, it is still wet inside. It needs more time. Put it back in your oven. If it does not wiggle, if you can't move it, and don't try that hard, but if you can't move it, that means it has finished baking and it will not move because it is stuck to your parchment or your mat and it needs time to cool. So then it's time to take it out. So I'm going to put one tray in I'm going to put the parchment in one oven and I'm going to put the mat in the other oven. So I'm going to put mine in now.
What about a convection oven?
I will answer that in just a second. Okay, somebody asked about convection oven. And my answer is you're going to have to play around with a convection oven. I use the conventional setting on my ovens. I have both. I have tried both. I found, and it's possible that it was because it was a brand new oven at the time, but I have found that using the convection in my oven, the fan blows so hard and so strong that all of my macarons end up lopsided. So they look like they've been windblown. They're all like thin on one side, thick on the other, and they're all ovals because they've all been kind of blown out of round, if that makes sense. So I put my parchment in for 16 minutes. I put my macaron mat in for 17 minutes. And my oven will tell us when we're ready. But I'm going to go ahead and make my buttercream now because I didn't do that in advance. Mostly because I wanted you guys to also have a chance to make it if you didn't in advance.
Edible glitter shapes. Can you bake them on top or add them after?
I don't know about edible glitter. I have not tried edible glitter. If you're talking about like the big glitter flakes, I would say I don't know. If you're talking about something like this stuff, it is edible glitter. I'm blanking on the name I use for it. I don't know. I don't know why I'm blanking. Sorry. You can use this before or after, and I'm going to demo it after because I think it's hard to get good coverage on your like wet macarons. I think gold luster dust. Lord have mercy. Yeah, luster dust is the word I was trying to come up with. I like the way luster dust looks after macarons have been baked because you can do so much more with it. You can add Everclear and paint with it. You can use gel food coloring and paint on top of your shells and then use luster dust, or you can dry brush the luster dust on top. For the most part, if you wanted to add luster dust to your batter, I've done it straight up in the bowl as I'm doing the macaronage process. That didn't come out great. It just got lost because so much of it was inside the macaron and not like on the top. And if I'm going to use something like luster dust that is so dang expensive to buy, I want to see all that beautiful luster on the top of my macarons, right? Or on the edges or whatever. I want to get the most bang for my buck rather than 75% of it being on the underside or in the middle. So that's my answer to luster dust before you bake your macarons.
The other trays wait to go in or wait to pipe additional trays into the bag
That,
ready to go?
okay, the question is, I'm not sure if y'all can hear. The question is, can the second tray wait to go into the oven for the first tray? And the answer is yes, but. So here's the truth about French macarons. Once you pipe them, that meringue, and actually even before you start piping them, that meringue is starting to break down. It is not as stable as a heated meringue. So one of the things you're going to be fighting, and it's going to take some trial and error on everybody's part to figure out, because your heat, your humidity will make a difference. Your ovens will make a difference. All of these things will contribute to your macaron success. So I say for today's purposes, yes, let your macaron shell sit. If I was doing this to sell, I would say I don't pipe that second tray until I can go into the oven in 10 minutes. So I would pipe the first tray, wait 10 minutes, put them in the oven, wait another 10 minutes, pipe that second tray, and by the time that first tray has come out of the oven, your second tray will be pretty close to being ready to go in. Does that make sense? So that's how I would do it. Because it is, I'm in Houston, I'm in Katy, Texas. My butter is almost melted at this point because it's been sitting out since we started. Thank you, Houston Heat and Humidity. So I'm going to add my butter to my mixer. I'm going to give that a minute to mix. And it hardly needs any time. And now I'm going to dump my powdered sugar, which I did not sift. I probably should have. But because I'm using a paddle attachment that has the scraper sides, the like silicone edges that scrapes as it goes around the bowl, it does an excellent job of also smushing any balls of powdered sugar that have gotten that have stuck together before they go in. So it does a really good job of making it smooth and creamy, even if I don't sift before.
So the person that was talking about edible glitter shapes, they were talking about bigger flakes.
We're talking about bigger flakes.
Yeah, not just flexible.
Okay, the truth is I have never tried those edible glitter flakes. However, I will say this. Number one, if you want something to stick to your macaron, it helps to put it on before. Oh, darn it. I was going to do the other thing that works. I will tell you that I know that works. Mini, like those little bitty tiny jet marshmallow, those work. I put those on top of like s'more macarons. Mini chocolate chips work. They keep their shape and they don't. I will say the mini chocolate chips and the little bitty tiny marshmallows, the dehydrated marshmallows, they both eat away at the top of the macaron a little bit. So if you bump that marshmallow or chip off after they come out of the oven, you will have a hole. However, they do like stick in place and they don't like burrow into your macarons, so they look beautiful. Let's see, what else can you do beforehand? Nuts are kind of a mixed bag. Nuts can be beautiful, but they have oils in them, and that oil does not do well with macarons. I would say the safest way is to add your edible glitter after they come out of the oven. I also don't know how the edible glitter itself will do in the heat. Even though you're low heat, I don't know what that looks like. So I'm gonna add, I'm just making almond macarons because that's one of my big sellers. And I'm just making American buttercream because it's just so fast and easy.
I think they were talking about like, you know, those sheets of like golds that you like.
Oh, that's gold leaf.
Yeah, I searched up edible glitter flakes and that's basically
So
what I got.
there are, Wilton makes edible glitter flakes
Yeah.
that are big fat flakes that you can buy. I don't, like I said, I don't know how they do in the heat. I definitely wouldn't put gold leaf on before you bake. because it will stick well to a macaron shell after it's baked. It does not need like the sticking power of the oven to keep it secure.
It kind of looks like pre-shredded versions of
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happens is if you don't add your sprinkles, if you want sprinkles to the top of your macarons, or the top of just the tops of the macarons and not on the bottom shells, it's really helpful to add it before it goes into the oven, if you can. But there are times when you're not going to be able to do that. And the easiest way I have found to add things after is to fill your macarons, make them look pretty, and then drizzle white chocolate in a pretty little zigzag pattern, and then add those sprinkles. And once the chocolate dries, then your sprinkles will be stuck. Or you can roll the edges of your macarons, and I'll be showing that today. You can roll the edges of your macarons in some sprinkles and things to sort of make them look pretty. All right.
Can you put the tray in the refrigerator as you wait for tray number 1 to cook?
Definitely do not put your tray in the refrigerator while you wait for your macarons to come out of the oven. You can put macaron trays that have been cooked in the oven to get them to cool down faster, but I would not put my macarons, my macaron batter in your refrigerator. I honestly don't know what that would do, but it scares me. I've never done that. It's like one of the few things I haven't ever tried.
Maybe you should
That sounds like it would dry them out really fast, because that's kind of what your refrigerator does. That would make me super nervous. Okay, I've got my buttercream here. Now, because I don't flavor my shells, the trick that I use for making buttercream is really flavorful and can flavor the entire cookie, the 2 cookies and the middle, because your filling is kind of doing heavy lifting for your macarons. So I like to double the flavoring so I looked up recipes online for buttercream, and I like them. They're good. They taste delicious, but most of the time I didn't think they were flavorful enough. I wanted more flavor. So I started doubling pretty much most recipes. And at least for American audiences, I've had really good results. That being said, if you're making something like a lavender filling, I would not recommend doubling the lavender, because that's a lot, and that's a very specific flavor. All right. Now I've got my buttercream here. And see, we have plenty of time to do that while our macarons are baking. I've got 1:40 to go on my first tray. So I'm going to clean up a little bit to give us room to move. All right.
Is the vanilla already doubled in the buttercream recipe?
Yes, the vanilla and the cinnamon are both doubled in the Snickerdoodle buttercream recipe I provided. that is exactly how I make my snickerdoodle buttercream. Also, I tend to not actually measure when I use vanilla because I have a love for vanilla, and I tend to measure with my heart and not and not actual measuring spoons. So I checked on my macarons, and it looks like I actually overfolded them, which really stinks because I know they're still going to be a little sticky when they come out of the oven, and their feet are too wide. And it's funny because the last 2 times I've done class, I've overfolded my batter, and I think it's because I'm too busy talking and not paying enough attention. Yeah. I'm so frustrated with myself because let me tell you, these little guys are just about perfect. So I'm gonna unseat them so you can see the shell.
Do you put your first tray on the bottom rack or top?
So this is another thing that you're gonna have to figure out with your own oven, how it bakes. So I put mine, if I bake 2 trays at a time, I use the top and the bottom. Today I use the middle because I'm only doing 1 tray at a time. So these are my cutie little shells. So this is 1 shell. You'll notice,
Do you want me to hold it in front of the camera? Or you get that out?
no, I'll just, I just need to take these guys out and let them cool for a minute, and then I'll spot it in. It's fine. Thank you.
Will you describe the wiggle test again?
Ah, the wiggle test. So, let's see. So here are my overfolded macarons. So I know my hand's in the way. I know, it is a dangerous game. So you just want to wiggle a little bit, and they are stuck. They are not moving. That's not moving. So they're done. So that's the wiggle test. So here is a beautiful macaron shell. See how so a macaron has these like signature ruffled feet, and they're supposed to be no wider than the top of the shell, which is exactly what this is. It looks like a flying saucer.
The feet jiggle when you're doing the...
Put it back in.
But the center doesn't. Are they done?
So when you wiggle it, it shouldn't move at all. You don't want to be able to lift it off. You want it to be stuck to your mat or stuck to your parchment. I would say err on the side of taking it out early. I would rather you take it out early than leave them in too long. Because taking them out too early, the worst thing that will happen is they will stick to your parchment or your macaron mat, and they'll be difficult to pull off, which I can show you how to do that. There's a trick. And if they stay in too long, they end up looking darker and they're harder. They don't have a soft bite, which is no fun. All right, I'm turning my oven off.
How does it look if you underfold your batter?
If you underfold your batter, someone asked what your macarons will look like. They will look very much like this, except they will have like nipples on them. They will have peaks. And it's easy to get rid of those peaks. Just use your scribe and sort of move that peak into the rest of your macaron shells and they will flatten out. Dropping your tray should help some. Feel free to drop as many as 10 times if you're underfolded and you've got these peaks on your tray from underfolding. Does that make sense? Hopefully everybody understands. Okay.
How do you know if they're overfolded?
I'm going to show you what overfolded looks like because I just did it.
Someone said I left mine in too long.
Okay.
They look too dark on the edges. I did
Okay.
mine in 18 minutes.
Yep. So for the person who did them at 18 minutes and it was too long, next time the next tray you bake, only bake them for 17 and see how they do. Now, even over baked macarons, even if they are a little bit dark on the edges, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will be too hard. Once we take them off our trays, if you can, once they're completely cooled, you should be able to sort of push in the center of your macaron, and it shouldn't shatter. If it shatters, you're definitely overbaked. If it doesn't shatter on you when you do that, then, and you can taste it. When you taste a macaron that has been baked too long, it'll almost taste burned. It just won't taste right. So your macaron should taste, the shells alone should be sweet and taste a little bit like almond. And that's it. All right.
Mine look a little deflated in the center. What did I do wrong?
Okay.
Every single problem.
Yep, that's good. So if they are deflated in the middle, which is actually kind of how mine look, and there is, like I said, no way to save them. There is no way to make them not look deflated in the middle. So I overfolded. I can tell because my feet are sticking out too far. They're sticking out from the sides of the macarons. So I'm gonna, and they're a little bit, there's a divot in the middle. Now, if your feet look perfect, if they're in line with the tops, and it's still indented in the middle, that just means you didn't bake them long enough. It just needs another minute, maybe 2, and you'll be fine. However, if your feet are furled, sticking out like mine are, they're likely going to stick a little bit to the tray. So mine didn't stick, thank goodness. I left them in another minute, but you can see they're a little concave on the top. That basically means they're going to be a little bit chewy. Actually, these look beautiful. They're still full because we did our meringue just right. But they just look a little overfolded. So again, like I said, they will still taste delicious. It's just not the perfect look for me. I wouldn't sell these. These become family treats. So my tray is still warm, but I can pull them off. So one of the tricks that I will show you, if they're indented a little bit, you can't put them back in the oven. Once they're out, it's too late, and I know it stinks. However, you can try to salvage as much of the macaron as you can. So you want to like lift up the mat or the parchment, and then you're gonna pull both the macaron and the parchment away from the macaron at the same time. You're gonna basically peel the parchment off. That will help save some of the middles. Because if you don't, if you just pull straight up, and parchment's not a good example. That'll happen more with the mats. are shorter than the top, like narrower than the tops. I think those macarons are just fine. Generally, I get those when I waited too long to bake, or the temperature in my oven wasn't high enough. So the other thing you'll see, if you haven't baked your macarons long enough, they almost sometimes look oily on top. You get little dots and it's basically because what's inside the shell is not fully baked. And I'm going to show you. I'll pull this straight off. So I'm trying to pull my macaron off, and it leaves a residue, and my macaron fell apart when I did it. A lot of times they'll leave their centers, and then you can't, like, sometimes you can try to save them, but not usually. So here are our examples, just so you can see. Our jimmies look just fine. They're still on there. Our sanding sugar looks beautiful. This guy was the eyeball, which is now completely melted in and melted a hole into our macarons. That's no good. This is the big sugar. That looks lovely too. Our nonpareils look just fine. Our confetti, those like flat discs, they look beautiful too. And then there are, oh, those are the stars. Those are the stars that taste like sweet tarts. Yeah, those 8 holes right on through. As did the little, so I had that princess mix that I talked about. The Jimmy is the pink, they're fine. There's some confetti in purple and white. Those did just fine. But what ate a hole were those, they taste like sweet tarts as well, the little gems. So there you go.
Mine are still cooking, but I can see that they're cracked. What would
Oh, cracked macarons stink too. So usually what cracked macarons means is that you didn't wait long enough before they went into the oven. That is exactly what happens to mine when I do not wait 10 or 15 minutes before they go in the oven. Some people need as much as 30 minutes before they go in the oven. Again, that's one of those things that depends on time, temperature. Because I don't want my meringue to break down, I will often put a fan, like I have a very big fan, like floor fan, like a box fan, that I turn on near my macarons, and that blows air so they dry out faster so I can get them in the oven faster. So I used to, when I was just learning, sometimes it would take forever for them to get that, like, that matte finish and to be dry to the touch. And I would go to the movies. I would pipe them and leave them and go to the movies and come back 2 hours later and then put them in the oven. And usually they had these like narrow feet because I had waited kind of a long time. And it was probably because I come in, turn the oven on, and it probably wasn't completely up to the right heat when I put them in. I just wait for the oven to ding ding, it's ready, and I put them in no matter what the temperature was. So, so the cracks come from going into your oven too fast. They need more time to sit.
the person who got the cracks
Mhm.
don't have any heat on the macarons
no feet either.
I've seen those from yours too.
Yeah,
The big-
my guess is that the no feet and the cracks are the same thing. Like not waiting long enough to go into the oven. I could see that result of both things.
How long should you let your macarons rest on the pan after removing them from the oven before taking them off?
Okay, so now mine have been out of the oven. My ceiling fan is on, so I probably only have to wait 5 minutes. Basically, if you can touch the tray without oven mitts and it's cool enough to the touch that you can mess with them, then you're fine. So the goal is you want them, but you can leave them 24 hours on the tray if you wanted to. They don't have to come off right away, but I say let them cool, I don't know, 5-10 minutes before you start removing them. The closer to room temperature they are, the better. How's that? Okay, so the next step is taking them off your mats. I'm gonna toss that guy.
Is it okay to add sprinkles after they're baked?
Absolutely. Yes.
And
So
do that?
the question was, can you add sprinkles after they're baked? You can. However, they're not going to stick to the top. Your sprinkles won't stick. So you're going to need some other something. Like you're either going to need to utilize your buttercream or your filling, or you're going to need to utilize something like melted chocolate and dip the edge in melted chocolate, or pipe a little curly Q of melted chocolate and then put your sprinkles on before it dries or before it hardens. So the next thing, once you take your macarons off your mats, you want to try to find macarons that are the same size to match up. You want a top and a bottom that are close in size. So I hold them between my fingers, and I use my fingers as sort of measuring devices. If the edges of one match up with the edge of the other, I know I've got a good pair. So I just go through all of my macarons. I usually start from biggest to smallest, or smallest to biggest, because then I don't have one big and one little at the end. So I go through and I make matches, and I line them up on the sides of my pan. And once I have all of my matches made, then I unseat the tops. So I go through, I have all my matches, and I'm taking off the tops. So I've got tops on one side, bottoms on the other. Now I can take my piping bag of buttercream, and I'm going to pipe dollop in the center, very much like I did making the macarons. And I like a lot of filling. People who put this tiny amount of filling, I don't understand those people. Also, we didn't flavor our shells. We need all the flavoring we can get from these guys. So I'm a big fan of flavoring. So I put a big dollop of buttercream there, and now I'm going to use both hands to hold the top and the bottom, and I'm going to twist like I do when I'm eating an Oreo cookie, except this time I'm twisting and pushing instead of twisting and pulling apart. But now I have a finished macaron. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Kat, are there any other questions?
Someone answered this question.
Okay.
But they asked, have you ever tried freeze-dried strawberries as sprinkles, and did they get okay?
Okay, that's a good question. What did the answer say?
I think she said in the notes that they were okay.
Okay. So I have never baked with freeze-dried strawberries in my mix, because again, I don't flavor my shells. But I love to use freeze-dried strawberries in my buttercream. That is actually the secret to my strawberry buttercream, which is probably my second biggest seller. And people love my strawberry, and it's because I use the freeze-dried strawberries as the flavor component to my buttercream. So I basically, instead of using something like strawberry preserves, which would make your buttercream really loose, because I'm Texas, I really need a buttercream that will hold these two shells together and not slide apart. So I like fillings that don't have a lot of moisture. And also I'm a cottage baker, so things that have a lot of moisture are things I can't offer my customers. So things like freeze-dried fruits is a great way to add flavor without a lot of moisture. It's a great trick. Okay, one more thing I just wanted to show you. I was going to show you what it looks like with nonpareils. So instead of putting them on the tops, a great way to finish your macarons, and you can do this with chopped nuts, you can do it with sprinkles. So you want your buttercream to come all the way to that edge of your shells. And then I'm just rolling this in a bowl of sprinkles. These are nonpareils. And then that is what your finished macaron looks like. When you roll them, roll your filling basically in something like sprinkles or nuts, it makes a beautiful finish. The other thing that I have done, if anybody needs ideas, let me grab it real quick. This stuff is amazing. This is called Dab and Hold. It's a Wilton product. It's basically edible glue. So this is another option for anybody who forgot to add sprinkles, or one time I made maple pecan buttercream and it had maple pecan macarons, but I wanted one larger piece of a pecan on the top, and I used this stuff to glue it on because I don't love white chocolate, but this has no flavor and it dries clear, so I could put those pecans on the top of my macaron shells after they were filled and beautiful, and I came through and glued each little pecan piece down. All right. If you want to stay great, I just wanted to show you luster dust as well.
There's a couple questions.
Okay, go ahead, Kat.
What's your biggest seller?
Biggest seller is almond. Strawberry is very popular. I sell a lot of strawberry. Lemon or lemon blueberry is also very popular. Nutella, people love Nutella. And I had a good recipe for Nutella buttercream, and so I used that same ratio of ingredients, and I made that into peanut butter buttercream, and I used cookie butter buttercream, using that same ratio of ingredients with my Nutella recipe, because peanut butter, Nutella, cookie butter, it all has the same consistency. Okay, I was going to show you luster dust.
What is the best way to store macarons? Deep seal bags, do they need to be stored on the countertop or in the fridge?
So, it's all about your filling. Macaron shells are going to be good for probably even up to 5 days just out on your counter. However, your buttercream will be different based on whatever you use. Buttercream ganache, if you use something like jams or jellies, those things can't be left at room temperature. So it really all depends on what filling you use as to how you store them. I actually store them, I have lids for these very trays. This tray will hold about 48 macarons, all lined up like soldiers. And then I put the lid on and I put them in my fridge. I store mine in my fridge because I want them to last as long as possible for my customers. Also, the other thing is macarons are really best on day like 2, 3, 4, 5, especially if they're stored in your fridge. After that, they start to lose their potency. Any extracts that you use will start to lose their flavor. My coffee macarons, I can still smell them, but I can definitely tell that they've been in my refrigerator for like 9 days now. So they are not at their peak. I will not sell them. I will give them to my family, eat them myself, give them to friends. They've been in the fridge for 9 days, so they're fine to eat, but I recommend storing them in the fridge. Lots of people also talk about putting them in the freezer, and they like them in the freezer. I have not had good experience with storing them in my freezer. That may be my freezer. I don't know. You're gonna have to play around with that yourself. So I did want to talk a little bit about luster dust. So you can use luster dust and dry dust on your macarons, just straight up dust on your brush and on your shells. It doesn't give it a real bright finish, but and I'll show you in a sec. I use grain alcohol, Everclear, and literally a tiny bit of dust, and I use the cap to measure my Everclear, a tiny bit of Everclear. And then I'm going to get a different brush. I already used the other one. And I'm going to swirl this around and then like pick up as much of that gold as I can. And then that's what it looks like when you wet brush it on. It looks so beautiful and sparkly. That side I dry brushed, but you can hardly see any of the gold. But you can definitely see the gold on this side. One of my favorite ways to use luster dust or color is a splatter. So I just hit the brush in my hand and you get different patterns. I do them for Halloween and do them in, I do white shells with red splatter. Looks like blood spatter. A little gory, but people love them. So you can use food coloring gel with your grain alcohol. You only need a teeny tiny bit to do a lot. And then I used to rinse out my dishes at the end. I definitely rinse my brushes, but I'm just gonna leave this because what will happen is that Everclear, and the whole point of doing it this way is the Everclear at room temperature, it evaporates. So it leaves behind just the dust, and I can reuse this later because it doesn't go bad. And that's why my the gold on the macarons looks dry now, because that Everclear has already evaporated. You can use vodka instead of Everclear. That's fine, but don't use any other kind of alcohol. Rum, tequila, all of those things have sugar in them, and sugar makes them sticky. So even after they dry, they're still tacky and sticky to the touch, and you don't want your macarons to look like that. So, does anybody have any last questions? I'm gonna call it done today, and I will let my kiddo go, and I'm gonna sit and answer questions in the chat. But, okay, Kat says there are 2 more questions.
First one, do you ever put a ring of buttercream and then compote or jam in the center for a surprise?
Yes, I do put a ring of buttercream around the outside of the macaron shell, and then put caramel or compotes or curds and things in the center. I absolutely do that. It's delicious.
So
It's another way you could do like chocolate ganache that's really thin, that's not been like whipped. You can do ganache in the center too. The possibilities are limitless.
So I think this is the same person who got the cracks and
Okay.
no feet.
The same person who got cracks and no feet.
She said, my second tray has short feet. What could that be from?
Okay, I'll be really honest. She says she has short feet on her macarons. I love short feet. Short feet are fine. Petite feet are beautiful. They are just as pretty as big fat feet. I actually have a preference for petite, really short feet. So I think those are probably perfectly done. Mine did not come out great today. So don't use the ones I'm showing as a good example of what feet should look like, because mine are too fat. Mine are overfolded.
Someone missed how to store. Do you do it already filled or fill as needed?
Okay, so because macarons are better after day 1, I always fill them and then put them in my fridge and store them. That being said, I'm a cottage baker, I do not keep inventory. So, like, I had a pre-sale this last week, and pickup was Thursday. So, I made shells on Tuesday, I filled them Wednesday, they picked up on Thursday, and hopefully are eating them over the weekend, so that they're getting them really 24 hours after I filled them. I think your countdown counter to like when your macarons are at your peak, start when you fill them, not when you bake them, because you could bake the shells, put them in your freezer for 3 months, take them out and fill them, and that's when they start their countdown of time. That's when your filling starts to marry with your shells and become one, and then they've got like 5 days while they're at their peak. Any other questions?
Could you show us the ones you made previously so we can see a correct macaron?
She said, can we see the ones you did previously, which are good, so we can see what a good macaron looks like? And I go back to my little batch of coffee ones. These are beautiful macarons. They have good feet, and that's a coffee filling. There's no coffee in the shells themselves. So this is I would say these are a very nicely done macarons. Their feet are in line with their tops.
Can you tell us how to freeze and thaw them?
Okay, because I don't freeze and thaw mine, I can only tell you what other people have recommended and told me. And that is, you can freeze them, I don't even know how long, probably a couple months. I would freeze them, personally, I would freeze them in some sort of box or tray or hard-sided something. I would not put them in a Ziploc bag, because if they lived in my freezer, the children would come through, move everything around. I would have a pile of shards when I took them out. So I would put them in a hard-sided something box, Tupperware, and then I would freeze them for, a week, a month. Probably 3 months is about as far as I would probably go. And then the way most people talk about thawing them is to take them out of your freezer, put them in the refrigerator, leave them there for a day, and then put them out on the counter and let them come up to room temperature before you even open the box. So you don't open the box until they come to room temperature. And I think, at least in Texas, that would be sitting on the counter probably an hour or so, maybe more. And then they would probably be up to room temperature, and that's when I would open the box and see what I got.
Someone wants to know more about your binder over there.
Somebody wants to know about my binder, so I'll talk about my binder real quick. Okay. So I started making my binder because I was just having trouble keeping up with really all the buttercream recipes and things. So the way I have mine sectioned, the first section is actually macaron recipes. So I took a class at Sur La Table, so their recipe book is in here. I don't use that recipe anymore. I use what you use today is very similar to Indulge with Mimi. So if you look her up online, she had great troubleshooting. She's got great information. Her numbers may be different, but the ratio is the same. So your ratio of powdered sugar to almond flour, they're exactly the same. The ratio of those things to granulated sugar and granulated sugar to egg whites, all the same. Sorry, not identical, but the ratio, the numbers are the same. So I'll show you this. This is what I did because I make tons and tons and tons of macarons. And what I need to know usually is if I need 200 macarons, how much do I need to make? So the top line is how many shells I can make. The next line is the ingredients: almond flour, powdered sugar, egg whites, granulated sugar, cream of tartar. And the 60 is my class list. That's what we made today. It's the one here. So we used 156, 156, 120, 108. Those are our ingredients for today. But I want to see, and actually this number is actually the smallest batch that my KitchenAid likes to make. I have tried making fewer. It doesn't work well for me. So I do this number or more when I make them. And, oh, I went the wrong way. Sorry. I make this number or more. A double batch of what we made today is the biggest that my mixer likes. So, but I have other recipes. I have the Lauderay recipe. I have the Sur La Table recipe. So I have these things sort of, the ratios of ingredients increased or decreased based on the original recipe. So that's in my binder as well. And then, because sometimes I do like to make, I wanted a chocolate macaron recipe, a red velvet. Red velvet's really the only time I flavor my shells because I need chocolate or cocoa powder in my shells to give it that chocolate flavor. I can't add it to my filling because I want my filling to be white cream cheese filling. And I can't do that if I've got cocoa powder anywhere in there. So I've got extra recipes. So recipes that I've downloaded online. So I've got a section for just shells. Then I've got a color chart. So I didn't want to have to think every time. If somebody wants blue macarons, what flavors could those be? So I made myself a chart. I like it so. So I did that. And then I also put together a list of buttercream recipes. So I just did this in Word. I made my favorites. The ones I do all the time, strawberry, Nutella, whatnot. Then I've got Swiss meringue buttercream recipes. I've got high humidity recipes. I've got caramel recipes. I've got so in Texas, the cottage baking website for us, for Texas, has these baking books with recipes that are approved by the state. So I have those all printed out and in these page protectors so that I can just flip through and see my favorite fillings. So I have a lot of those because they're called Come and Bake It. So the second book is all fall flavors, pumpkin spice and whatnot, and each recipe I have in its own sheet protector, but only the ones that are approved. The ones that didn't get approved, I just put in there. And then, because I do classes at my house, and I print up the recipe and instructions for buttercream for each station to work independently, I have my recipes for them, and then I have my templates. Oh, I also have, because like I said, I'm a big Excel person. I created this template on Word or Excel, and so whenever I'm doing 6 flavors for Mother's Day, I can take my pre-sale orders, know how many macarons I need to make. I have a column that says add 12 because I always make extras, and then times 2, that tells me how many shells I need. And so then I've got this running tab of I need 100, 200 shells in each flavor or design. And then the back of my form has what are my fillings? What do I need to make? So this is like my checklist as I'm going. I have something to work off of. And so I keep them so that I can see, what did I do last Valentine's Day? Oh, and sometimes I get really creative and I plan out what they're going to look like. Just like you guys plan out your sugar cookies, I plan out my macarons and what they're going to look like. And I keep that with my Christmas totals. So the other thing, it's fun to look back and go, oh, I sold 1,000 macarons last Christmas. So now I know what to plan for this coming Christmas. So anyway, that, and then templates are the last thing. And my food handlers course. So that's it. That's what's in my binder.
Have you posted your strawberry and Nutella buttercream recipes anywhere?
I have not posted my buttercream or my strawberry or Nutella recipes anywhere. So the snickerdoodle I felt like was it's also a big seller for me. And I felt like that one I would share, but I'm keeping my strawberry. I will share the Nutella because, and I'll share it in the comments, because it was what we made in Sur La Table. And so I feel like you could probably go online and find that recipe anywhere.
Do you have any packaging advice?
Packaging advice. So, yes, sort of. Everybody does their own thing. Okay. Everybody does their own thing. And I say, find what works for you. This is what works for me. I decided early on that I was always going to have white boxes with windows. That's my bakery style. So all of my packaging is a bakery box with a window. I put my label on the front of the box, or sometimes I'll put it underneath, like here. This is a 6x6 box, and for me, because I make macarons that are 2 inches, I can stack them up. I put a sheet of wax paper on the bottom, and then usually they look like this in the box. So that gets me 12. So a 6x6 box for me holds 12 when they're turned on their sides like this. Or I can lay them flat and get 9 on the bottom. And because it's a 3-inch box, I can get them, I can get 18 in here. So that's what those 12 look like. There's still space for one more row, but this box will close. So I do a 6x6 box for 8 to 18, and I do a 4x4 box for 3 to 8, because it will hold 4 laying flat, so I can stack them 2 on top of each other, or I can put 6 standing up on their sides. And then I do an 8x8 box, same thing, 8x8 box, and that will hold, what is that, 4, 6, 16 laying flat, so 32 total. And most of my orders are about 2 dozen. When I have larger orders, I just package them in multiple 8x8x8 boxes. Occasionally I do 3x3, I do 3 macarons in a little gable box. I've not found them in white at a good price. All my packaging for the most part either comes from BRB or Amazon. Oftentimes they're the fastest, easiest, cheapest shipping to me. And I buy them in like 250 boxes. So I'm buying a lot at one time to help minimize the cost. Does anybody have any other questions?
I mean, you answered the very last question.
Okay. I think we're going to call it done. It's been 2 hours. I've had so much fun with you guys. Thank you all so much for joining me. And I'm going to end the live and save it now. All right. I'll continue to answer questions in the chat. So if anybody bakes later, ask questions here, and I will come back to this feed and answer your questions. All right. Thanks, y'all. Bye.